Movies, a lot of movies say this is based on a true story, not 100% true. And my book is based on a true story because the first half or the quarter of it, I was, let's just say, not all there. So, let's, first of all, and I know that you, by the way, Debbie, this is your book.
Did you sign it?
Yes.
Thank you.
And everyone is entitled to a free book today because I'm not allowed to sell them at the library. No, because you showed up. And, why am I not white? Quick answers. Why am I not white? Anybody?
You're eclectic.
Huh?
You're eclectic.
Eclectic?
Eclectic.
Okay, that's an answer.
Because there's no such thing.
Anyone else?
Point of view.
Huh?
Point of view.
A point of view? Okay.
Race doesn't exist.
Actually, Seneca taught about this in critical race theory. But
There's no such thing.
why? Okay, let me expand it a little bit. Why is no one white?
Because race doesn't exist.
It was a label created.
Okay, cool. Okay, all of those are right answers. There's no one right answer because obviously I'm white identified in the society. I like to use that term, white identified. But by the way, who labeled me white?
Society.
Who was the first one to label me white?
Society.
Huh?
Society?
Society, okay. But anyway, we'll get into it. My disclaimer I know that I'm identified as white in this nation and world. I know that this identification and branding affords me considerable unearned privileges and opportunities which those who are not branded as white do not possess. That is the current reality. However, it is a perverted, distorted, diluted, and false man-made American and European manufactured reality, not an authentic one. The subtitle of this memoir could have been One Man's Journey from Delusion and False Identity to His Authentic Self. So I share my story of awakening or awokening with the hope that it may help you discover your authentic self and identity, and then act on that discovery in ways that bring us closer to our collective authentic reality of oneness. But first, so that we're on the same page, let's start with some definitions. We'll just read. Okay. You need glasses? Okay. Just read a little bit of that, the first few sentences. Of whiteness, the definition of whiteness. You might have to stand up.
Whiteness, along with the entire notion of distinct races, is a fabricated description.
No, wait. They can't hear you.
Louder.
They can't hear you.
Okay. Whiteness, along with the entire notion of distinct races, is a fabricated description and false identity devised by European slavers and subsequently adopted by Americans. Its purpose was to rationalize an apparent practice of the transatlantic slave trade and the enslavement of Africans with darker skin, thereby fostering the illusion and fallacy of white supremacy. In the book, are you done?
Yeah, that's good. See? Can you see?
Where?
Beloved community. That's a little bit about whiteness.
Beloved?
By the way, just to expand on that a little, no European called themselves white until they were labeled white when they arrived here. Correct me if I'm wrong and speaking out of turn, but no Africans considered themselves black. They considered themselves Nigerian or Ghanaian or whatever culture they were. we were Italian, Irish, German. Okay, so this is a manufactured identity. Go ahead.
Beloved community, a community in which everyone is cared for, absent of poverty, hunger, and hate, and infused with oneness, equity, and peace. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. popularized the term during his lifetime of activism and imbued it with new meaning, fueled by his faith that such a community was, in fact, possible.
Thank you. Beloved community. Triple evil. The triple evils of society.
The triple evils of poverty, racism, militarism are forms of violence that exist in a vicious cycle. They are interrelated, all-inclusive, and stand as barriers to our living in the beloved community. When we work to remedy one evil, we affect all evils.
Thank you. Next one.
Woke. Awakened, enlightened, and aware of the authentic realities of our existence here on earth. The main one being the essential oneness of all living things, our interconnectedness and interdependence, and the fact that every individual, nation, and culture is both unique and exceptional in their own way, with not one superior to another.
Thank you. And then it goes on to define some other terms, woke equalizers that I kind of invented. And that's a group, when I say superheroes, right, Amon? Superheroes that stand up against bullying in all its forms, whether state-sponsored bullying, individual, and so forth. And that's what equalizing means in my vernacular, okay? Non-violently, using words and actions to demonstrate, sometimes tough love, saying, no, you're not gonna get away with this. So those are some of the common definitions. By the way, some of you might be wondering why the t-shirts there. No, I'm not selling them. But I couldn't figure out, I like to wear t-shirts with messages, and I couldn't figure out which ones to wear, so I brought them all. Now, and you will have a chance to scroll through them, and I will show you a couple. But one time I made the mistake of saying, when I was speaking at the state capitol on immigration issues at a rally, I made the mistake of wearing layers of several of the shirts, and I figured at certain parts of my talk, I'll just flip one off. Well, that also was good until I went to flip the first one and it got stuck on my head. So the lesson I learned is if you have a big head or a big nose, don't wear layers. So that's why I have them there. Okay, so without further ado, Cece, you can shoot aside. Okay.
No, that's not it. I'll let it slide for now.
So starting with the 50s, that's when I was born. Why don't you sit over there so you can see the pictures? Okay. I labeled the 50s separate but unequal. I was born into a society that was, they claimed separate but equal, but it was really separate but unequal. These are my parents, Italian. My father was, and my grandparents. My mother was the only child of my two grandparents there who literally came on the boat from Italy. So we were I'm third generation immigrants. Okay, my father served in the World War, and here's some more of my stragglers. Welcome. My least favorite dog. No, I'm joking.
Wow.
But so I grew up in a bubble, completely oblivious. I was only 6 years old by the end of the 50s, but I didn't know anything that there were other people other than white Italian people, really, because in in Jackson Heights, Queens, the neighborhood was all Italian. And that, most people don't realize, even to this day, the North is still more segregated than the South. It was never forced to integrate. You still have black, Italian, Puerto Rican, white neighborhoods and so forth. So, and that's the way it was back then. Shoot.
That's not our cue.
She wanted my cue to be something that's not family oriented.
That was your idea.
Okay. So, the 60s happened, and I claim to be blessed to be born in this period, the 60s and 70s, because the 60s was a time of questioning everything. If in my vernacular in the book, awakening, people became woke, okay? They were forced to. And so these are just some of the events that happened while I was still in elementary school. I didn't really still know what was going on, except things would come over the loudspeaker and say, President Kennedy has just been shot and killed. We were still in elementary school, and we just knew that it was something bad that was happening. And then, soon after that, his brother was assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy, and of course, Dr. King. You can go to the next slide. The Dr. King's March on Washington, and of course, in Memphis, where he was assassinated at the hotel there. All of these things, again, I was oblivious. I was young. I just knew something was changing in the society. By the way, back to elementary school. Excuse me. It was homogeneous. It was all white, but there was a fair amount of bullying that went on. I don't know if it was more then than there is now, but kids have always found ways to bully and pick on each other. They picked on me because I had a big nose. That was one of my nicknames, nose, and my nickname was Pellegrino, so Pelican. Right? And so the reason I bring this up is, both good things that happen in your life and traumas form your later life, are a basis for a lot of the things you do later in life. And so I remember being bullied quite a bit, but I don't know that I was bullied more than other kids, but I remember that. I was somewhat of a nerd. I was born with brains, and so I was picked up. That stayed with me. To this day, I hate bullies. I hate bullying. And so that was a foundation. But, it wasn't until later that I learned, when I became more woke and older, that these assassinations were not coincidental. They were not accidental. They were not acts, although many people still believe, of individuals and so forth, but they were coordinated. Okay, and if you watch, I'll just point you to the movie about J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI of that time. Okay, so this is what was happening while I was, still in the formative stages. These great, actually, all three of them committed to undo Jim Crow in the South, and then one by one they were assassinated. So you put the pieces together, read in the book the proofs that I have, and other places, whether it was random or not. Go ahead. So the swinging 60s counterculture revolution begins, okay? Here's Woodstock, Jimi Hendrix, of course, the Black Panther Party, all of this was going on. It was a counterculture revolution. And again, I'm grateful to have been born into that. Otherwise, I might still be oblivious out there in my bubble of white privilege and not knowing anything. I know some things now. My kids will remind me, I don't know everything. But during this time, I was in junior high. I went into junior high, right? Drugs and alcohol were endemic. That was part of the revolution. That was part of the awakening, for better or for worse. My first experience with drugs was in middle school, junior high, on the wrestling team. Most people don't realize that the entry of drugs into society came two ways, and still do to some extent, through sports and through the military, okay? That's how it happened then, because we had the Vietnam War, heroin being introduced. And you can't, how many of you are veterans here? Tom? Yeah. Okay. Have you been in battle?
I was in the combat area, yes.
Combat, right?
Yeah.
No. But people, friends who have been in combat tell me that you can't do some of the things you have to do and stay straight. Okay, you're either using drugs, or there's some way that you're dealing with those issues. And that was so I was introduced to drugs, first alcohol and then drugs, in wrestling in junior high, with the consent of the coaches, the teachers, okay? So perform, in performance enhancing drugs and so forth. I'm an addict, okay? That's my nature, I'm an addict. So I quickly became addicted from that young age. You can go to the next one. But those are some of the cultural things that were going on. You see, Jimi Hendrix is up there twice. And Jimi Hendrix OD'd at a young age on drugs. We lost the Beatles. So again, there's trauma and there's blessing, and both of them make up who we are, okay? The trauma was drugs, but also, in my case, the blessing was drugs, because again, if I didn't use drugs and it didn't shock me out of my reality then, because my parents raised me, just like most people in that generation, to be like them, to follow tradition. What's the saying now? Make America what? Great again? That's what they mean. Let's go back to the time when everybody just followed tradition blindly, didn't question anything, and of course it was separate and unequal. So if it wasn't for mind-enhancing drugs, and a lot of hallucinogenic drugs and so forth, again, I may never have broken out of that mold and questioned things. So yeah, it was a positive and negative, both. Also, how many of you have heard of of white privilege? Okay, what about blue privilege? Do you know what blue privilege is? Mm-hmm. My father was a New York City police officer, okay? So I had both white privilege and blue privilege, meaning I could really do no wrong in the society. I could get away with just about anything. And so, and I did. I pushed it to the limits. It was at the police resort that I was introduced into drug dealing, because a lot of the cops' kids were the biggest drug dealers because they couldn't get busted, they couldn't get arrested. But I wasn't smart enough to just sell them. I used them and became addicted to every drug there was. Luckily, there was not crack then, otherwise I probably wouldn't be here. But I was, even though I was afraid of needles, I had other people shoot me up for heroin, So during that period, the death of Richie was my childhood friend. He was a real nerd. He was way smarter than me, smarter than most of the kids. And he also was part of our whole drug dealing gang and so forth. and he and his father got in a confrontation, and his father shot and killed him. And I think his father was a police officer as well, or he was security. And so they made a book first, and then a movie about the death of Richie. And at that time, my family and my parents and I were going to counseling. You know, they were trying to figure out how to get me off of drugs and so forth, even though they were in denial too of the extent of it. And so we like to say we were briefly portrayed in that film together with Richie and his families, and when they showed us going to counseling. So at that time, I was trying to get off of, I was trying to go straight. I was about 20 years old then. And that movie came out with Ben Gazzara and Robbie Benson. Who knows those names? If you do, you're old. Okay, two famous actors. And so I got to speak on college campuses about that event, and that led me to become a drug and substance abuse counselor, since I had all the experience. Okay, so and a community college actually gave me an associate's degree. I mean, I registered, I took some classes, but I've been waiting Seneca ever since for my honorary bachelor's and master's. So, go ahead, you can go.
It's not the cue.
So, I call it the Severn 70s because we broke the chains. We broke those chains of tradition. Okay? So, that's...
These are the pictures he provided to me. I just put them in order, put a little captions, and put a slideshow.
So
We can see you now.
He told me to put that. These are his captions. He was very strict.
but anyway, my friend Marcus and I, and you can read in the book The Adventures. We had lots of adventures during this period, lots of highs and lows. We hitchhiked this whole country, and you know, I don't know how many of you have seen Easy Rider and movies like that, but we had lots of adventures, hitchhiking around the country. And the beautiful thing was, it was like an intentional community. The difference between then and now, yeah, we were doing a lot of bad things to ourselves. You know, an interesting statistic, we were protesting the Vietnam War. That was our main thrust, besides civil rights, you know, activism. But later on I learned more people died during that period of the Vietnam War from drug overdoses than died on the battlefield. So we were killing ourselves and protesting, you know, killing of others. But that was the hypocrisy of the time. So yeah, there's lots of adventure. May Day 1971, 7,000 arrested in disruptions. By the way, the Kent State Massacre was first time in American history that on our soil, our own National Guard killed people, killed students, you know, shot and killed students. That was when I was in high school and my athletic career ended. It actually ended when I joined the football team, and on the first, I was an end, and when I caught the first pass and ran the wrong way, I scored a touchdown. But and I wasn't high right then at that point. But anyway, but at our high school, we had to decide, were we going to lower the flag for half-mast for the students that were killed? And here's some more of my straggling family, my son and daughter. So at our high school, the hippies, okay, I was a hippie and a jock. Okay, jock was the athlete, hippie was, you saw the picture. So the hippies decided to lower the flag. The school would. So we gathered around the flag to lower it, and then the jocks, the athletes decided, no, the hippies aren't going to do this, so they came in force to fight with the hippies. So that's when I had to make a choice. And I chose the hippies. But that was at Kent State. Then we marched in Washington. By the way, let me just say this about all of this time, through all of this, I still didn't have a black friend, not one black friend, because still I lived in a segregated, even in these, you know, I mean, I bought drugs and sold drugs to black people, you know, and I, you know, interacted at work, or not at school because it was segregated, but I didn't have one black friend. I didn't really know anything. I was still completely sheltered in a white bubble. Yes, I stood up for civil rights, but it was intellectual. I had no clue what black people were going through, or people of color, I should say, no clue at all. And I say to this day, it hit me the other day, being a hippie was a facet of white privilege. There weren't too many black hippies. You know, Jimi Hendrix crossed over, was both, you know, I mean, but there weren't too many black hippies. The black people who were in the struggle, they were there for the struggle, not just the fun, you know. So even during this whole transformation period, revolutionary period, we were still separate and unequal, you know, and I was part of that. And so we marched on Washington to protest the war. Along with 7,000 others, I got arrested. They had to open up Washington Redskins, at that time, stadium, and turn it into a jail. That's how many. It was the largest mass arrest in American history. Of course, it was illegal. They just swept us, and you know, and arrested us. And you know, eventually they got a settlement with the ACLU, and everybody got a little bit of money. But I gave false ID, so I didn't get anything, which we did often. But this was the time. Go ahead. So during this time, I also got to travel. I was starting to tell about the camaraderie, about the intentional community. The beautiful thing about this period was hippies, anarchists, black radicals, you know, all the different types of groups, environmentalists, we were all like one big community. We were in harmony because we were all different. We were all rebelling. So we had that connection. So everywhere we went, we had a family. You know, hitchhiking, you know what the biggest problem was with hitchhiking? When you got to a ramp, you had to wait in line. There were so many people ahead of you, okay? Including single women. I mean, everyone was out like that. Now, there was the other side, the the haters, I call. And, you know, if you had long hair, you were a target, just like you had a black skin color, you know, or dark skin color, so you were a target. So you had this support, this massive support system everywhere you went. Most of the time just by looking at people, because we had our uniforms, we had our hair, we had, you know, so you had that. That's a difference, you know, than today, where it's much more disjointed. So anyway, we decided to go to Europe. Well, my grandparents moved back to Italy after they retired. And so they, you know, I was the oldest of four. I was spoiled, totally spoiled. And my mother actually had, she had many miscarriages. Sorry for laughing about that, but when I went bad, they sometimes said I was the seventh miscarriage. But I was a thalidomide baby. I don't know if you know about thalidomide, but it was a drug that was used when you had miscarriages and you couldn't conceive. Well, of course, like today often, but much more in that period, they didn't test the drug. They tested the drugs on the general public, not in all of the trials that they do now. And thalidomide babies were, majority of them had birth defects, you know. So I used that excuse when I went bad, that I'm a thalidomide baby. I was also a forceps baby, where they pulled you out with forceps. My head literally came to a point. My parents had to massage it, you know, throughout. But this was, you know, this was medicine back then. You know, make America great again, right? We want to go back to all of it. You mean make America white again? But anyway, so I got, my grandparents sent me tickets to go and see them in Italy. Took advantage of that. Flew to Amsterdam because why? What was Amsterdam? The pot capital of the world, right? And that was the only place, really, one of the few places where it was legal, where everybody could smoke. And so started there, hitchhiked and trained and had many adventures to get to Italy. It's in the book. Read in the book. So I wish now that I had done the same thing straight, you know, not high, to be able to see all of it. But it was beautiful, and a lot of great experiences there. And also, remember, this is all my journey to woefulness. I'm sharing this so that other people can look at their journey, and you know, not all going to be as wild as mine, and I understand that. And I'm blessed to still be here because some of my friends, you know, are not, that went through these things with me. But this is my journey of awakening or awakening, and it took a lot. It takes a lot for people to, you know, in America to come out of their bubble, out of their shell. So this, now I see a whole nother culture out there. There's a whole nother world outside of America, okay? Which a lot of Americans, they don't even realize there's another whole world out there. So that was that trip. Okay, on our cross-country hitchhiking journey, we ran into cults. A lot of, you know, opportunists, I would say, both business people, religious, and so forth. They knew that after this period of drug use, and really what we were doing was identity seeking. That was, we were seeking our identity. Who am I? Okay, they knew eventually that would burn out, and people would be turning to religion or money. Those two things. So those opportunists then formed cults and attracted a lot of the young people who were formerly drug users, hippies, and so forth. And one of the big ones was Children of God, and there's a story about that in the book, how we kind of exposed that as we traveled. So yeah, I talked about this. Okay, I was a street pharmacist. You see that PDR? That's a physician's desk reference. Every doctor has one. I had one. I carried one because I was a street pharmacist. I wanted to know at least what I was ingesting and what I was selling, and that had all of the drugs in it. Okay, but how did I go straight? How did I hit? First of all, I hit my bottom. Everybody's got to hit their bottom if you're an addict. My bottom was facing a judge and 63 years in prison for selling heroin to federal undercover agents. Okay, at the age of, what was I, 20? At the age of 20. And so that was my bottom. I went to court, and remember, I had white privilege, blue privilege, everything, and my lawyer said, you're still going to do some time, maybe a couple of years, nothing big. You know, I didn't want to do anything. You know, what kid wants to, right? So I went to court, and the first time I literally said a sincere prayer and said, God, or whoever you are out there, I was raised Catholic, but I just, repeated the rituals growing up. Whoever you are, if you get me out of this, I'll, do right. I'll do good. And so the judge said, I researched your background and found out you graduated in the top 10% of your high school, large high school, couple of thousand people. That was the first time I knew that I had graduated. But of course I did supply my teachers with drugs. So, but anyway, so he said, I'm going to give, the good Lord gave you some brains, I'm going to give you one more chance. 5 years probation. If I see you back in this courts, all those felonies, 63 years, whatever. You know, that was sufficient to scare me. That was my bottom. I went out of there, thank you, and I started studying every spiritual or religious path there was, you know, because I made a deal with God, and so, you know, that was it. Now, back to white and blue privilege. If I was a person of color, I would still be in prison. There's no doubt in my mind that that was a huge pass, okay? This is the society we live in. So I did. I dove into, that's Maharishi Yogi, transcendental meditation, yoga, Hinduism, Buddhism, went to the temples, studied, and went through different spiritual studies and practices. And martial arts actually helped me the most, teaching me about my body, spirit, and so forth. And then I was able to build that bridge between different religions and realize they're all teaching pretty much the same spiritual truths. So that's how I got out of that cycle. During that time, I fell in with some other ex-hippies. Well, we weren't 100% ex-hippies. We still smoked weed and meditated, and we lived a monastic life. We moved into the mountains of New York, and we studied every spiritual path, practiced mind control, psychic stuff, anything you could imagine. And we finally the three of us came to the decision that we need a teacher. We've done everything we can do, reading the books and you know, practicing and so forth. Now we have to go out and find our guru, our shaman, some spiritual leader, so to start teaching us more. And so we didn't have much money, okay, because we were living this monastic life. And my probation officer, remember I was on probation, every time I'd go to see him, I'd teach him about some new spiritual path that I was studying, and he finally cut me loose after 2.5 years, because he didn't want to hear any of that. He was a party, he liked partying and stuff. So, hi Monica. Well, so anyway, we decided we're going to do one last big drug deal to finance our spiritual search. Okay, and we figured we could get hash. One of the three was an Olympic bobsledder. We were up in the Adirondacks where the bobsled, Lake Placid, New York, that's where we were, up there. So we figured, you know, the Olympic team doesn't go through customs, they have kind of diplomatic immunity, so we could smuggle it in with the Olympic team. And hash oil was the easiest thing, most concentrated hashish oil. So anyway, we made this whole Mission Impossible drug deal where we would go into Morocco, score the hashish, bring it to the Olympic team in Italy where they were practicing, and smuggle it into the country. One of my friends, he had a little bit of money to finance this deal. Actually, he went to the bank. He had like 5,000 in there. The bank made a mistake. It said 15,000. He took it out, and we used that money. And Fred, the other guy, he was the bobsledder, so he had the means to bring it in, and I had the connections here to sell it. So we had our Mission Impossible team. So talk about hypocrisy. We spent half of our days praying, meditating, practicing the spiritual, practicing our Mission Impossible drug deal, worldwide drug deal. So the time came for us to go. So Richie and I flew to Paris. We wanted to have a little bit of a vacation before we got to Morocco. And everybody we met on the trip was into all young people again were into some spiritual search. Because again, it was like the end of the hippie era, and everybody was still on identity search. And so we didn't tell them what our real mission was. And we finally made it to Spain. Torremolinos. By the way, Torremolinos and Malaga was the other Amsterdam. That was where all the young people of the world gathered at that time, right on the Riviera, on the Mediterranean Sea. So that's where we had to take the ferry to Morocco. And by this time, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to back out, because in Morocco, I heard the stories. You know, you either you give them the money and then you get shot in the back, or you get arrested and you're in one of those prisons for life, you know. So I was scared at this point. I was praying something happened. You know, I wanted to back out, but I didn't want to be the one to ruin the deal. And so we get on the beach, Richie and I. Remember, Fred is still with the Olympic team, so he's waiting for us in Spain, in Italy. And on the beach were what they called then Jesus freaks. Okay, young people going out recruiting you for Christ. You know, some of these same cults and so forth. And so some of them said, we have a nice hacienda up in the hills. While you're waiting for the ferry to Morocco, why don't you hang out with us? So I didn't really want to, because they were very pushy in their religion, fundamentalist Christianity. And so, but Richie wanted to, and so we stayed there, and long story short, he joined. He flipped and joined them, and that was the end of our deal, because he had the money to buy the stuff from Morocco. I was so grateful. And but before I left, they really wanted me, because I believed in the oneness of religion. I believed in the unity of all religions. That was what I had come to in my studies, that they're all different paths, but they're going the same. You know, I had come to this, and to them that was blasphemy, because fundamental Christianity, only one way, right? And so they really wanted me. And so they asked if they could pray on me, lay hands on me, and do their, you know, whatever they do to influence me. So I said, sure. I'd like for people to pray for me. We got in their church. They all surrounded me, started speaking in tongues and laying hands on me. And so I was kind of a clean slate by then. I was done with drugs. I was done, you know, I was on a spiritual search. I had no money. I didn't know where I was going. And so I just kind of, for the first time, detached and said, okay, you know, God, Great Spirit, universe, guide me. Give me a vision. What should I do? Right? While they're praying on me. And I got the picture, not necessarily the vision, the thought. Since I already believe in all of these spiritual paths, go back to New York and open up a place of spiritual study where people can decide for themselves. And I invite all of the ones that I've studied to teach there. Okay? And that became my mission. So I got up from the prayer, told them that. They hated it. They said, no, that's a devil. All right? And I got on the plane and went back, moved in with my parents on Long Island, and to save up money to open up this place of spiritual and religious study. And so during that period, I went to every religion, every faith, every spiritual that had meetings in New York. I went to them to learn about them and invite them to my new center that I was opening. So I went to the Baha'i faith, and I don't think I had heard of it. I may have, because Seals and Croft, a popular rock band, were Baha'is, and all their lyrics were about the Baha'i faith, but I was high then. I wasn't really paying attention. And Dizzy Gillespie, the famous jazz musician, was Baha'i and used to teach and so forth. But I may have known that, I may not have. But anyway, I went to the Baha'i. They heard my story. They asked me at their meeting to tell my story, and, which was a mistake, because my story can fill books. And so, even up to that point. And so they smiled and sat back and said, Rich, that's exactly what we're doing. The Baha'i faith teaches the unity of all the religions, the unity of the races. Everything that you've come to believe is what we are already doing. We have centers already, you know, where we're teaching all of this and everything. Why don't you just join us and put all of this experience behind it? And I said, yeah, that makes sense. And that's when I joined the Baha'is. And I only have like maybe 10 more minutes, so we gotta go
25.
quick.
Yeah.
No, because we have to get out of here by 4.
Okay. 15.
Okay.
15 more slides.
So anyway, the next years, the 80s, well, yeah, the late 70s, early 80s, I spent traveling around, learning more about Baha'i teaching. When I say in the book, teaching oneness, because that's what we teach. That's what the Baha'is teach. Okay? Then in 1982, by here, time for you to sing A Whole New World.
We don't have time.
Because if it wasn't for this whole new world, you wouldn't be here. Okay? But I was recruited by some Baha'is to go to the Caribbean, and the Baha'is don't have missionaries. We're self-supporting, they call them pioneers. You have to go and live among the people and struggle with the people. In other words, not be up in some pedestal. There's no clergy in Baha'i, as a matter of fact. Okay, so, but they recruited me to go to the islands, and I went, and that was a whole new world. And I met my wife there. I don't know if she wants to sing the whole new world. And
I could think of some different songs.
So many adventures. Really, I was for the first year or two, I was the ugly American, thinking I knew it all. My kids would say I still am, but I was thinking I knew it all because I'm American. Of course, I had special privileges there, again, as a white American. She'll throw something in. But anyway, finally, when I started to live local, look through the eyes of the local people, learn, listen and learn, I realized I know nothing. Me as an American, as a quote, white American, much of what I've been taught, even my wokefulness was American woke, very limited, not global wokefulness. That's why I started now the Global Woke Institute, and it was a total transformation. And of course, we had 3 children, well, 2, third on the way, Mona, and we came back to the States. We had a plan to go back there, but then we had 5 more kids. Yes, I am a recovering Catholic. Yes, we did plan. We did use family planning. We planned for 10 and only had 8. But these are all the answers that I have to give all of this. But anyway, there's a beautiful family that grew up through the 80s and so forth, and and the 90s. I'm sorry. Most of the 90s we spent, and it's in the book chapter by chapter or subchapter, all the different towns we visited in the southern U.S., teaching oneness, again, many experiences. This is when I really started to learn about Black America and people, Native American. I had to leave America. I had to, we're too close, what's the saying, to the trees, to see the woods, or vice versa. I had to leave and come back to learn about the real America, and so that was the 90s. And there's my beautiful daughters, none of my beautiful sons. I don't know why my sons we're kind of emasculated. One Baha'i teaching is the equality of men and women, and I think my family's taken it to the extreme. So, but and now grandkids. We have 7 grandkids. 2 of my favorite ones. 2 of my favorite. I have 7. They're all favorite. But anyway, there's Aman back there. There's Azalea too. So really, and I have to do this next time, don't really have time, but the 2000s is really when, after all of this learning, that I became woke. And even that is an overstatement, because who's really woke? You know, it's all relative. We're all awakening, we're all learning still. There's so much to learn. But that's when the realities start to hit of really who I am and who I am really, and who America is and what America is and so forth. And part of that learning was the law of attraction. That book is fantastic, Black Flags and Windmills. It's about Katrina, what really happened in Katrina. It's a great lesson for us to prepare now instead of waiting for catastrophe. And then War is a Racket. That is Marine Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated ever in the history of American Armed Forces. And you have to read his book. He said that he was the ultimate racketeer and gangster, and the American military is because of all of the campaigns that we do. It should really be called the Department of Offense, not the Department of Defense, because the way we go into countries and basically rape them on behalf of our corporations. Another great philosopher said, you know, there's not underdeveloped countries, there's overexploited countries. And so I start, you know, in the new millennium, together with the millennials, this explosion of knowledge, you know, which is hard to grasp because there's so much, we're learning so much. That's why there's, go ahead, you can go. That's why there's so much reaction now. I mean, to me, it's hilarious for people to be against woke. Who doesn't want to be awake? I mean, I know it's harsh realities, and just like when biologically we need sleep, so we have to regulate how woke we are, because, you know, it can be overbearing. But, you know, 9/11 happened, of course, in 2001. So what did we do? We had a choice. We could become moral giants and figure out why people hated us that much, or we could go and bomb them. Okay, so what did we do? We turned on, we had unnecessary, unjustified war instead, retaliation, which increased terrorism rather than decreased it, and we turned on our own Muslims in this country. Okay, so I spent the first part of that decade defending Muslims. Then, go ahead. And the next was immigrants. After, you know, it seemed like Americans always need somebody to hate, a group to hate. Okay, so after we were done with Muslims, and we're still not done 100%, then we turned to immigrants. And the big joke is, we're all immigrants. Everybody's, you know, it's a country of immigrants and so forth. So, so I spent, you know, again, I hate bullying. You know, whether you're bullying an individual or a group. The bullying, we know what causes bullying: lack of self-esteem, lack of your own identity. So that's why this whole thing, and I'm going to have to wrap it up early now, or quick now. But the reason for this book, besides my legacy for my family, and also, you know, I had to go back and say, when I read what I wrote, I said, phew, I did all of that, I'm going to take a rest. But no, we can't ever rest, because we've got to keep fighting the good battles. But this is for everyone to be able to develop their own authentic identity. It's just a lesson in one individual, one man's journey from whiteness to oneness. You know, not everybody's going to have the same journey or outcome. I mean, people might want to say, I own white now. Okay, yeah, I was given that title, but now I own it. Here's the good things of being white. Definitely, black people might say the same thing. Black is beautiful. And we've been called black for so long, now we're going to own it. That's up to each individual. It's not for anybody to label anyone else. we have to decide what our authentic identities are. And so, Layla and Jason, if you would give these out. These are some worksheets, okay? Two worksheets. I'll give everybody one of each. No, you give it, and you give everybody one of these. Okay? So, one is your radical identity search, okay? It's a sheet where, actually give me one of those. Thank you.
Done.
So,
You want me to just flip
Huh?
through?
hmm?
You want me to just flip through?
Yeah, you can flip through. Oh, there's Amon. Hey, Amon. So, on the sheet, you'll see there's two sheets. One is for goal setting. That's based on the power of attraction. It's a very simple sheet. You just put in one column what you don't want, the next column what you do want, and your steps to achieve it. The reason why we put what we don't want, a lot of people focus on what they don't want, and the power of attraction says whatever you focus on, you'll get. So put what you don't want, then cross that out. Then in the next column you put what you do want, and then the steps to achieve it. This is an exercise that I've put many groups through, and we will continue to do that online and so forth. The other sheet is one that arose out of this whole identity search, authentic identity. Okay? Each of us was given an identity. We were given names, given race, given all kinds of things by our parents, by our teachers, and so forth. Okay? Can I help you? Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
I don't think I'm getting it.
Oh, everyone get it? No? Okay, go ahead.
Wait, does Jason have
Go
the
ahead.
same papers as me?
Huh?
Does Jason have the same papers as me?
Okay, thank you.
Do me and Jason have the same papers as me?
No, you don't have to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the first one is, the first column is given, your given identity. The second column is what you accepted, okay? And you still may accept. And the third is what you chose, okay? What you chose, what you choose for yourself, your identity. So, and again, I'm going to do workshops on this, on these sheets. These are just for your own personal use. Now, so, any questions before we wrap up? And also feel free to send me any critique. Obviously, I went over time. I need to cut it short because I want to keep it within an hour. I didn't get to go through some of the slides that really wanted to talk about. So that's on me. But thank you for coming. If you didn't get a book, feel free to take a book and share this with whomever you can, because again, it's not about me. I'm just using myself as an example of the journey that I went through, which may resonate with different people or different parts of my journey. Okay, but it's all about you, your journey to your authentic self, and through that, hopefully, we'll come to authentic, beloved communities, intentional communities. And through that, authentic nationhood and an authentic world. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Now, get out of here in 5 minutes.
You got time.